My name is Daniel Harris, and I do not know how much longer I will stay alive to tell this story. I am writing these words in a small rented room at the end of Salem Avenue in the city of Baltimore. The room has only an old creaking bed, a cracked wooden desk, and a window overlooking an alley that never dries, even on sunny days. No one knows that I am here, and I do not think anyone would believe what I have experienced. I arrived in Baltimore at the beginning of winter. Rain fell almost every day, and the air was thick with the smell of damp concrete and mold. I was running away from what happened in Pennsylvania, but that story does not matter anymore because what is happening here is worse in ways I cannot measure. I rented the room on Salem Avenue because it was cheap and no identification was needed. The landlady, an elderly woman, only asked my name before handing me the key. Her eyes were clouded, and her skin sagged in folds that made it impossible to guess her real age. When I asked about the house, she said only one thing: no one stays here longer than 2 months. I thought she meant the conditions were terrible. I realized on the first night that it was not about that. I lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling where the paint had peeled into uneven patches. Water dripped somewhere inside the wall. When the clock struck 12, a different sound joined the night. At first I thought it was in my head. A soft knock echoed from somewhere in the building. 3 slow knocks, then silence. My heart pounded as I sat up in bed. A cold draft slipped through the window frame, but it could not have made that sound. I tried to lie back down and told myself it was the wood adjusting to the cold. Moments later, the knock came again, louder, closer. I realized it was coming from the hallway outside my room. I crept to the door and pressed my ear to the wood. Silence. I turned the knob and opened a narrow gap. The hallway stretched in both directions, narrow and dim, lit by a single yellow bulb that barely kept the shadows away. Nobody was there. I stepped out barefoot, and the floorboards were icy under my feet. I followed the hallway to the top of the staircase. The next knock came from below. I swallowed hard. I had no flashlight, so I placed my hand on the wall and began to descend. Each step groaned under my weight. At the bottom I saw the small storage door beneath the stairs. It was slightly open. The knock came from the darkness inside. I held my breath. A faint moan drifted out. I stumbled backward, desperate to return to my room. As I turned, my eyes caught the mirror on the wall across the hall. A shape moved in it, a human shape that did not belong to me. I spun around. The hallway was empty. Only the trembling yellow light and the rain outside. I ran back to my room, locked the door, and sat on the bed until morning. I swear I heard footsteps in the hallway all night long, dragging and slow. Yet when I peeked through the crack under the door, the floor was empty. The second night was worse. At 11 o'clock I heard whispers outside my door. Not a single voice but many, male and female, murmuring as if in secret conversation. I pressed my ear against the door, but could not understand a single word. I bent down to the keyhole. I stared back at me. I fell backward and hit my head on the desk. When I gathered the courage to look again, the hallway was empty. I stepped out slowly. The dim light flickered. The staircase waited at the end of the hall. The storage door under the stairs was still ajar. A pale hand emerged from the darkness, trembling before slipping back inside. I ran to my room, slammed the door, and shoved the desk against it. Knocking erupted all around me. On the walls, under the bed, in the ceiling. I covered my ears, but the sound filled my head. I did not sleep. At sunrise, I went down to the lobby. The landlady was sitting in her wicker chair, staring out the window with those milky eyes. I stood trembling and forced myself to speak. "Have you heard anything strange?" "In this house." She turned her head slowly. Her lips barely moved as she said, "You only have 1 night left." The landlady's words sank into me like ice. I wanted to leave, but something kept me in that house. Maybe it was fear. Maybe a strange pull that felt like curiosity mixed with dread. I spent the whole day wandering the streets of Baltimore. walking past the inner harbor, past streets wet with last night's rain, trying to forget what I had seen. Yet every shadow and every alley reminded me of the hallways of Salem Avenue. By dusk, I returned. The sky had turned the color of iron, and the wind howled through the narrow street. The house waited for me, silent, with its cracked steps and leaning porch. I thought of leaving my things behind and running, but I could not make myself walk away. Something inside whispered that I needed to see what hid in the dark. I entered, and the air was thick and stale, carrying a faint odor of earth and rust. The landlady was gone. Her chair was empty, rocking gently, as if someone had just left it. I climbed the stairs to my room. The hallway was as dim as always, and the single yellow bulb swayed. The rain began again, tapping the roof like countless fingers. I locked myself inside my room and moved the desk back against the door. I waited for the first sound. It came at midnight, a single, sharp knock from the hallway. My chest tightened. I forced myself to listen. Silence followed for a full minute. Then another knock, this time from below. I lit the small candle I had bought that afternoon. The trembling flame cast shadows that made the peeling walls look alive. I opened the door and stepped into the hallway. My candlelight reflected in the mirror at the end of the hall. For a moment, I thought I saw two lights, as if another candle burned beside mine. When I blinked, the second light vanished. I descended the stairs, one slow step at a time. The air grew colder, my breath fogged. When I reached the bottom, I realized the storage door under the stairs was no longer ajar. It was wide open, swallowing the candlelight. I crouched and held the candle toward the opening. The smell of wet earth rose to meet me. A narrow staircase led down into blackness. I did not remember seeing any basement in this house before. The third knock came from below. I felt something in me break. Fear and some deeper instinct pushed me forward. I descended the hidden staircase. Each step was damp and rough under my feet. Water dripped somewhere below. The deeper I went, the quieter the world became, as if the city above had vanished. At the bottom, I entered a low-ceilinged basement, lined with brick. The candlelight flickered over strange marks carved into the walls, circles and lines that twisted into shapes I could not recognize. My head began to ache as I stared at them. In the corner of the room stood a wooden chair. Leather straps hung from its arms and legs. The wood was dark with age and stains I could not identify. The knock came again, this time behind me. I spun around. The stairs I had descended were gone. Only a brick wall stood there now, wet and cold, and the candlelight reflected off its slick surface. My hands shook. My heart hammered so hard, I thought it would break my ribs. Then I heard the whispering again. The same murmur from the night before. Voices of men and women, some young, some old. They spoke from the walls themselves, and now I could hear a word repeated in all the overlapping whispers. Stay. My candle flickered violently. For a split second the light went out and I was swallowed by darkness. I froze. A hand touched my shoulder. I screamed, and the candle reignited by some breath of air I did not feel. I turned around. No one was there. The chair in the corner had moved. It now faced me. I ran to the far side of the basement, searching for another exit, my candle shaking so hard, the flame stretched and bent. My fingers brushed something cold and metallic. A door handle. I pulled. The rusted metal door creaked open into a tunnel that sloped even further down, carved from stone and dirt. The smell of rot drifted out to meet me. Far in the darkness, I heard the sound of something crawling, wet and slow, dragging itself toward me. I backed into the basement again, trembling. The whispers grew louder and louder, forming a single chant that rose from the brick walls. Stay, stay, stay. My knees weakened. I thought I might faint. Then I saw it. In the reflection of a puddle on the floor, I saw my own face staring up at me, but it was not my face anymore. My mouth was stretched into a wide grin I could not feel. My eyes were black and hollow. The reflection in the puddle refused to move with me. My chest tightened as I realized the grin belonged to something else, wearing my face. I stepped back, and the puddle rippled. The image kept smiling, teeth too long, eyes like black pits. The candle shook in my hand, and I felt a sharp sting on my wrist. I glanced down to see a thin line of blood, as if something had clawed me. My hand went numb. The whispers shifted. They no longer said stay. They now said a name over and over, a name I had never heard in my life. Ephraimi swallowed hard and turned toward the tunnel. The slow, wet dragging sound had grown louder. I could hear the scrape of bone on stone, a body that was moving without balance or rhythm. My legs trembled, but I forced myself forward. Stepping into the tunnel with the candle raised high, the stone walls were rough and wet. Mold clung to every surface. The air was colder than the basement, and heavy with the stench of rot. My breath made white clouds in the dim light. I walked only a few feet before I saw it. A figure crouched in the tunnel, its back toward me, its body moving in a jerky rhythm. Its skin was gray and stretched tight over bones. Patches of hair hung from its scalp. I heard the sound of it chewing and realized with horror it was eating something raw and wet. I froze. The candle hissed. The figure stopped chewing. Slowly, its head turned. Its face was not human. The jaw was elongated, the eyes too far apart. But the skin, the shape, was almost mine. My own features stretched and ruined. It hissed and scuttled toward me on all fours, faster than I could react. I turned and ran back into the basement, the candle flame flaring from the sudden motion. I nearly slipped on the damp floor. The whispers erupted into a roar. They no longer formed words. They were screams, shrieks that filled my skull and rattled my teeth. I spun in circles, searching for an exit, any exit. The brick wall, where the stairs had been suddenly cracked, mortar crumbled, and a section of wall caved inward. I sprinted for the opening and scrambled through, scraping my arms on the jagged bricks. I emerged into a hallway I had never seen before. It sloped downward, lined with warped wooden planks and rusted pipes. My candle barely lit 10 feet ahead. Behind me came the sound of claws on stone. The thing from the tunnel was following. I ran, heart pounding, lungs burning. My candle flickered and I knew if it went out, I would be lost in the black. The hallway ended in a massive iron door. It was carved with the same strange symbols I had seen in the basement. My fingers shook as I tried the handle. It turned with a screech. Inside was a chamber that made my blood run cold. Dozens of wooden chairs were bolted to the floor in a circle. Leather straps hung from each arm and leg, some broken, some still stiff with age. In the center of the circle stood a single stone altar, covered in deep scratches. The scratches were words in a language I did not know, but I could feel their meaning clawing at my mind. Pain surged in my wrist again. I looked down. The cut had deepened on its own, forming the first letter of a name. E. From the hallway came. A sudden, sharp clatter as claws scraped against the iron door. The sound echoed like metal tearing. I backed against the far wall, the candlelight shaking violently. Then, the door burst open. The iron door slammed against the wall with a deafening clang. The sound of metal on stone echoed through the chamber like a funeral bell. My candle shook in my hand as I stared at the doorway. The creature crawled in, hunched and jerking, its limbs longer than any human's should be. Its head scraped the top of the frame as it entered. I could hear its joints crack with every motion. It sniffed the air. Its chest expanded with a wet rattle, and a sound escaped its mouth that was almost a laugh, but far too broken to belong to anything living. The candlelight revealed something new. There were more than one. 3 shapes slithered behind the first. Emerging from the dark hallway, their faces mirrored fragments of my own features, distorted as if each one had tried to become me, but failed in some horrible way. I stumbled back until my shoulders pressed against the cold stone. The circle of chairs surrounded me, each one like a silent witness. I realized with a spike of terror that the straps were stained dark, almost black. I knew it was old blood. The creatures stepped closer, their long nails scraping the floor. My breathing grew ragged. Suddenly, the symbols on the stone altar began to glow, a faint red. The chamber seemed to hum, a low vibration that crawled up my spine. The candle flame elongated and hissed, as if reacting to the pulse in the room. I felt something tugging at my mind, a sensation like hands pressing against the inside of my skull. Words formed in my head, though no lips spoke them. "Sit down," I whipped around. The voice had come from nowhere and everywhere at once. The chair closest to me seemed to vibrate. The leather straps quivered as if alive. I shook my head violently. My heart hammered so hard it hurt. The creatures tilted their heads in unison, imitating my motion, and began circling the altar. Their claws clicked on the floor in a slow rhythm. The symbols flared brighter. I heard distant footsteps above, but the sound was muffled like it came from another world. I backed toward the altar without realizing it, as if some unseen force pushed me forward. My candle flickered violently and nearly died. I cupped my hand around it, but the flame bent toward the altar, as if pulled by an invisible wind. A sharp metallic sound made me jump. One of the creatures had reached the stone altar and dragged a claw across it. Sparks flew. Its black eyes locked on mine. Then, with a sudden burst of speed, it leaped. I ducked and rolled instinctively. The creature smashed into the chair behind me, splintering the old wood. The other two lunged, their movements jerky but fast. I bolted toward the far wall, but my foot caught on something. I fell hard, the candle flying from my grip. The chamber plunged into darkness. I heard them moving, claws scraping, wood cracking. A wet, hot breath touched the back of my neck. I scrambled to my knees, my hands slipping on the cold floor. My fingers brushed against the stone altar. The moment I touched it, the world changed. The darkness turned red, not from light, but from a color that burned inside my eyes. The chamber stretched and warped. The creatures froze mid-motion. Behind them, the stone walls peeled back like wet paper, revealing endless black voids. A figure stepped out of the void. It was tall, taller than the room should allow. Its limbs were impossibly thin. Its skin stretched over bones that bent wrong. It had no face, only a smooth surface that reflected my own face back at me, distorted and wrong. When it spoke, the sound was inside my blood. "You are ready." Pain exploded in my wrist, and I screamed. The letters carved themselves into my skin, spelling the name that had haunted the whispers. Ephraim's iron door slammed shut by itself, trapping me inside. I could not breathe. My lungs felt trapped, as if invisible ropes coiled around my ribs. My wrist throbbed where the name had appeared. Blood trickled down my arm in slow, sticky lines. Ephraim's letters glowed faintly, not with light, but with a heat that pulsed beneath the skin. Every time my heart beat, the letters seemed to push deeper, like they were sinking into the bone. The tall figure loomed over me, its faceless head tilted slowly. Behind it, the void shimmered and swirled like liquid darkness. The three creatures crouched low, as if bowing. I heard the voice again, though it was no longer a whisper. It filled the chamber, echoing inside my skull. "You entered the house of your own Willie," tried to speak, but my throat was locked. A single sound crawled out, dry and broken. With a figure leaned closer. My reflection on its smooth surface was wrong. My face was stretched, my eyes black pits, my mouth twisted in a scream I had not made. "You sought what was hidden beneath this city." Shook my head. I did not even know why I came here anymore. Curiosity, a pull I could not explain. My mind felt scrambled, memories slipping. The voice continued. Ephraim was the first to open the way. He carved a path beneath Philadelphia with blood and silence. He invited those who could hear him, and now you have answered." The air grew heavy. I could barely lift my hands. My wrist burned with a new intensity, and I saw the blood rising, not falling, lifting into the air in tiny floating beads. They drifted toward the figure and disappeared into its body. My stomach twisted in terror. I thought of running, but my legs refused to obey. The creatures moved closer, their claws tapping the floor in unison. One of them reached out and touched my shoulder. The cold was so deep it felt like it burned. The figure raised one long arm and pointed at the circle of chairs. The straps began to writhe like living snakes. Said the word hit me like a hammer. My knees buckled. I stumbled toward the nearest chair, fighting against an invisible force, but losing. The leather straps slithered around my wrists and ankles, holding me in place. I screamed, and the sound bounced through the chamber, raw and useless. The figure stepped behind me. I felt the press of its presence against the back of my skull. A sensation like teeth scraping bone filled my head. "Let me show you." Suddenly the chamber dissolved. I was standing in a street flooded with sunlight. People walked past me, smiling, laughing, living. The city was alive. I recognized Market Street in Philadelphia, the shops and the sound of cars. Then the sunlight died. A shadow rolled over the buildings like black water. People froze, there, bodies twisting, skin peeled back, faces stretched into masks of agony. One by one they collapsed, leaving hollow shells that twitched. A crack opened in the street, leading down into blackness. From that darkness came the three creatures, dragging the bodies into the pit. I screamed, and the vision shattered. I was back in the chair, my throat raw. The figure whispered directly into my blood. "If you open the way fully, they will never see it coming. They will never know you gave them to me." Thrashed against the straps, the leather cutting into my skin. The creatures leaned closer, their black eyes wide with hunger, and then, for the first time, I felt something inside me answer the voice, a single thought that was not entirely mine. Yes, the straps tightened. My vision flickered red and black. Somewhere above, the house groaned like it was alive. Dust rained from the ceiling. The figure leaned in so close I could feel the cold, radiating off its skinless body. "You will bring them to me." The chamber shook. A crack split across the floor, and I realized with horror that the stone altar was sinking into darkness. The creatures hissed in anticipation. The last thing I saw before the candle finally died was the smooth, faceless surface of the figure, leaning over me, and my own face reflected there, smiling. When I awoke, the chair was empty. The straps hung loose, swaying like something had just released them. The chamber was silent. I staggered to my feet, my legs shaking, my wrists still burned. The letters were no longer bleeding, but they were carved deep, like they had always been part of my flesh. I ran my hand over them and shivered. Ephraim turned in circles, searching the darkness. The tall figure was gone. The three creatures were gone. Only the altar remained, and the faint circle of candle wax on the floor. I forced myself to move toward the stairs, each step like walking through water. My ears rang with a constant low hum, as if the world itself vibrated. When I reached the top of the staircase, the old house groaned. The door to the hall was open. Light streamed through the cracked windows, but it was wrong. A pale yellow, like the sun was dying. I stepped outside, and the air hit me like a wall. It stank of sulfur and wet metal. Philadelphia was silent, not empty. Silent. Cars sat frozen in the streets. Traffic lights blinked, but no one moved. I saw a man halfway through crossing the street, standing perfectly still, his face locked in an expression of surprise. A woman held a phone to her ear, frozen mid-step. Pigeons hung in the air like toys on strings. My heart pounded. I stumbled into the street, waving my arms, shouting, "Hey, hey!" No one blinked. No one breathed. I touched the man on the shoulder. His skin was cold and dry like old paper. I pulled back, horrified. The humming in my ears grew louder. A shadow passed across the sky, and I felt my stomach lurch. I looked up. The sky rippled like water. Through it, shapes pressed against the thin barrier of clouds. Shapes that were too large to belong to any living thing I knew. Long fingers trailed through the mist, searching. My breath caught in my throat. The name on my wrist burned, and I heard the voice again. "You have opened the first door." I stumbled backward, shaking my head. "No, I did not. I do not want this." The voice was calm and heavy. "You walked the path. You sat in the chair. You saw the truth." A sound like cracking glass filled the air. I spun around. One of the frozen people was moving, not fully, just his neck, twisting in a slow, unnatural circle. His head turned completely around, the bones snapping with each rotation. His mouth opened in a silent scream, and blood trickled from his eyes, then another. A woman bent backward, her spine cracking in half. She began to crawl toward me on all fours, her head still facing the wrong way. The humming became a roar. I clutched my ears, but it was inside me now, pulsing with every heartbeat. The door behind me slammed shut. I spun and saw the house sinking into the ground, swallowed by darkness. I backed away, tripping over a frozen body. All around me, the city was waking, not alive, moving, hands twisted, mouths stretched, faces peeled. The world I knew was bleeding into something else. I screamed and ran. I did not know where I was going. My shoes slapped against the pavement, the sound too loud in the dead streets. I turned a corner and collided with someone running the other way. We fell in a heap, and I scrambled back, terrified. The man lifted his head. His face was wet with tears and sweat. He was alive. He could move. "You saw it too," he gasped. "You heard the name." Before I could answer, a shadow fell over us. Something moved on the building above, long and thin and impossibly fast. It slid down the brick like liquid darkness, and I realized with horror that the creatures were no longer confined to the basement. They were hunting. The man grabbed my arm. "We have to go now," I nodded, and together we ran as the first screams rose. Behind us, the city of Philadelphia had become a hunting ground, and I knew this was only the beginning. We ran until my lungs burned and my legs felt like they would tear apart. Behind us, the sound of screaming twisted into something inhuman. A shrill chorus echoing through the dead streets. The man beside me clutched my arm as if letting go meant death. He was maybe in his late 30s, with short brown hair, matted with sweat. "My name is Luke," he gasped between breaths. "Who the hell are you, Nathan?" I said, my voice cracked. "I do not know what is happening." He shook his head. I darted into an alley, pressing against the cold brick. Above us, something slithered across the rooftops, scraping against the metal pipes. We froze, barely breathing. Luke whispered so quietly I almost did not hear him. "I saw the markings on your wrist. The name. That is why they are after." Why? Swallowed hard. "How do you know about that?" "Because he lifted his sleeve. The name Ephraim was carved into his forearm too, still red and raw." I stared at him, a chill running through my bones. "They chose us," Luke said. "I was in my apartment when everything stopped. Then I heard it. The voice. It told me to leave. To find the others." We flinched as a shadow passed the mouth of the alley. A wet, dragging sound followed, like something heavy was being pulled along the street. Luke leaned closer. "We are marked. That thing you saw in the basement is not done with us. It is just starting." I wanted to tell him to shut up. I wanted to cover my ears and pretend the world had not split open. But the truth was everywhere. The city had become a corpse. We moved through the alley, careful not to make a sound. Every corner felt like a trap. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. We reached a street lined with small shops. Glass crunched under our feet. Storefronts were shattered, and the mannequins inside were twisted, like they had tried to crawl out before freezing in place. Luke pointed to a laundromat with its windows intact. We ducked inside. The smell of detergent mixed with the faint rot of something dead. We crouched behind the row of machines. Luke rubbed his face with trembling hands. "I saw it up close," he whispered. "I saw its real body through the sky. Ephraim is not human. It is not even from here." I shook my head. I did not want to believe him. He stared at me with wild eyes. "I think the first door was only a warning. I think there are more." The air grew heavy. My ears popped, like we were deep underwater. I grabbed Luke's arm. "Do you feel that?" He nodded slowly. The lights flickered. From outside came a sound like a chorus of whispers. Thousands of voices speaking my name in unison. I clutched my ears and squeezed my eyes shut. "Nathan, Nathan, Nathan." The windows darkened, not like nightfall, like something had pressed against the glass from outside, blotting out all light. Luke's hand found mine. His skin was ice cold. They found us. The front window shattered, and the darkness flowed in like liquid smoke. Shapes formed within it, long and jointed, skittering toward us. I ran. We crashed through the back door and into the alley, sprinting past piles of trash that had begun to move on their own. A bag ripped open, and a skeletal hand clawed toward me. I screamed and kicked it away. Luke pointed to a rusted fire escape. We scrambled up as fast as we could. My fingers slipped on the wet metal, but terror kept me moving. When we reached the rooftop, the city stretched out before us like a map of hell. Streets writhed with shadows. Lights flickered in patterns I could not understand. The sky rippled, and a massive eye opened above Philadelphia. Watching. Luke fell to his knees. "It is awake," the whispers returned, now inside my skull. "The second door is ready." The whispering in my head became a roar. Luke clutched his temples and screamed into the night, his voice breaking against the wind. Across the rooftops, shapes crawled toward us, moving like spiders on all fours. Their skin glistened under the trembling city lights, stretching too thin over bones that bent the wrong way. I pulled Luke to his feet. We could not stay here. We jumped to the next rooftop, my knees buckling from the impact. Luke nearly fell, but I grabbed his jacket and hauled him over. Behind us, claws scraped metal. The streets below were no longer empty. People walked in slow, jerky motions, heads twitching like broken marionettes. They tilted their faces upward in unison, as if smelling us on the wind. Luke whispered through his teeth, "They are not people anymore." We ducked behind a rooftop vent. My chest heaved as I tried to think, to plan, to breathe. But all I could hear was the voice. "The second door is open." Nathana clamped my hands over my ears. "Get out of my head." Luke shook me hard. He was crying. "Do not talk to it. That is what it wants." The sky rippled again. A circle of darkness formed over the Philadelphia skyline, swirling with pale lightning. Buildings seemed to bend toward it, as if the whole city were being pulled into a drain. Luke stared in horror. "That is the second door." A sound like tearing metal ripped through the air. The streets below split open, asphalt curling like paper. From the cracks, black tendrils erupted, writhing and lashing at anything they touched. One wrapped around a lamppost and yanked it into the ground. We ran again, rooftop to rooftop, as the city came alive with impossible violence. Windows exploded outward. Smoke rose from manholes. The air smelled like burned hair and rotting leaves. We reached the edge of a parking garage and climbed down a rusted ladder. My hands were bleeding from gripping the metal, but I could not stop. On the street, the world was worse. The shadows that had hunted us before were now everywhere, emerging from cars, crawling out of storm drains, sliding along the walls like liquid nightmares. Luke grabbed my shoulder. "We have to get underground. It will not see us there." We ducked into a subway entrance. The escalator had stopped, and the dim emergency lights flickered. The air was damp and cold. As we descended, the whispers in my head turned into a single voice. Nathan. I froze on the steps. It spoke my name clearly now, smooth and calm. "Nathan, I will show you what waits behind the third door. I shook my head. My lips trembled. Luke yanked my arm. Ignore it. Please. We reached the platform. The trains were gone. Water dripped from the ceiling in slow, echoing drops. We moved along the tracks, the darkness swallowing us. I could hear something moving in the tunnels, scraping and clicking. Luke whispered, "We cannot stay here long. If it opened the second door, the tunnels will not be safe." He was right. Behind us, the black tendrils had begun to creep down the steps. Reaching for the rails, we sprinted through the tunnel, my feet splashing in shallow water. Every breath felt like fire. Then, without warning, the tunnel walls began to shift. The concrete pulsed like it was alive, and faces pushed through, screaming silently. Their mouths opened and closed as if begging to escape. Luke stumbled back. This is not real, but it was real. I could smell their breath. The voice returned, louder than ever. "You cannot run, Nathan. I opened the second door for you. I will open the third." The ground shook. From the darkness ahead, two lights appeared, but they were not headlights. They were eyes, massive, yellow, blinking. A shape crawled into the tunnel, filling it entirely. Its arms were long enough to touch both walls, its skin dripping with black sludge. Its mouth opened sideways, a vertical wound full of needle teeth. Luke screamed. Run, we ran, but the thing was faster. It lunged forward, the sound of metal twisting as it scraped the walls. I dove into a side maintenance corridor, pulling Luke with me. We pressed ourselves against the cold, wet concrete as the creature slid past, filling the main tunnel with its bulk. The whisper came again, soft now, like a lullaby. "There is no escaping the third door, Nathan. I will show you everything." Luke covered his face. He was shaking violently. "I think it already knows where we are." The tunnel was silent, except for the distant dripping of water. Luke's breathing was ragged in the darkness. My heartbeat was so loud, I thought it would give us away. Then I heard it. The soft sound of something wet dragging across the concrete. It was not gone. It was hunting. Luke grabbed my wrist and mouthed a single word. "Run." We crept down the maintenance corridor, our footsteps splashing in shallow water. The air stank of rust and decay. My flashlight trembled in my hand as I swept it across the walls. Faded graffiti stretched like claw marks, and wires dangled like vines. The voice returned, calm, certain. "Nathan, it is time to see the third door." I clenched my teeth. Not yet. Not ever. Luke tugged me forward, but the corridor ended in a rusted metal door. I shoved my shoulder against it, and it groaned open with a screech that echoed down the tunnels. The wet dragging sound stopped. I froze. Luke froze. Then came a scraping. Faster now, rushing toward us from the dark. We slipped through the door into a storage chamber and slammed it shut. The room reeked of mildew and old oil. Broken chairs and rotting crates littered the floor. In the corner, a ladder led up to a circular manhole. Luke started climbing. I grabbed the rungs after him, but a boom shook the metal door behind us. Dust fell from the ceiling. It hit again. The hinges groaned. Luke shoved the manhole cover, and it popped open to the street above. Cold air rushed in. He scrambled out, then reached down for me. I climbed onto the street, just as the metal door below ripped free. The creature burst into the storage room, its body writhing with tendrils, its mouth opening in a scream I felt in my bones. We ran into an alley. The city was unrecognizable. Buildings had twisted like soft clay. Their windows stretched into hollow eyes. Cars were overturned and rusting in seconds, like time itself had turned against us. Luke grabbed my sleeve, looked at I, turned toward the skyline. The third door had opened. It was not a door in any human sense. It was a vertical scar of light hanging in the air above City Hall, stretching from the ground to the clouds. Around it, the world bent, pulling toward the light as if reality itself was unraveling. Shapes walked through it. Tall skeletal forms with heads that split, into 4 jagged points. Their bodies dripped with liquid darkness that evaporated into smoke. Wherever they stepped, the pavement cracked and blackened. The voice filled my head completely now, blotting out my own thoughts. "You are mine, Nathan. Cross the 3rd door and you will understand." My knees buckled, my vision blurred. For a moment, I saw through the door, a barren landscape of black sand and red skies stretched forever. Towering figures crawled along the horizon, each carrying cages full of human silhouettes that writhed silently. A massive spire of bone rose from the center of the wasteland, pulsating like a heart. Luke shook me violently. "Do not look at it. You will not come back." I tore my eyes away, gasping. We ran again, through streets that seemed to breathe. The asphalt under our feet pulsed like a living thing. Hands reached from storm drains, clawing at our ankles. We ducked into the ruins of a diner. Inside, the walls were smeared with black residue, and the air hummed with a low vibration. In the back, a cracked mirror reflected not us, but the city as it used to be, empty and calm under a normal sky. Luke stared at it. "Is that a way out?" Before I could answer, the glass began to ripple. Then the reflection smiled at us. My reflection stepped forward and pressed its hand against the other side of the mirror. Its mouth moved, and I heard the voice inside my skull. "Nathan, bring him with you. Step through." The diner shook. Outside, the creatures from the 3rd door were spreading across the city, their shadows stretching and twisting, turning streetlights into dripping pillars of flesh. Luke pulled me toward the back exit, but I hesitated, staring at my smiling reflection. My own eyes looked at me with a hunger I could not describe. Then the glass cracked. A hand pushed through, wet and black, and grabbed my wrist. Luke screamed my name. The hand dragged me toward the mirror. It was ice cold and slick, like raw meat. Luke clawed at my arm, shouting, his voice raw with panic. I could barely hear him over the voice in my head. "Nathan, step through. Become whole." The mirror surface rippled like water. My reflection leaned forward, half of its body already pushing into my world. Its face was mine but stretched, the skin gray and wet, the teeth far too long. Its eyes were pits of black dot. Luke roared and swung a broken chair at the mirror. The glass exploded into shards, slicing my face. The hand released me. The diner went silent. Then the walls began to bleed. Thick black liquid oozed from the cracks, dripping onto the floor and pooling around our shoes. The buzzing in the air grew louder. I clutched my head as the voice screamed, "You cannot break what is already inside." The floor lurched. Luke grabbed me, and we stumbled toward the back door, but it opened to a street that no longer existed. We were standing on a ledge of cracked concrete overlooking an abyss. Below, the city was gone, replaced by a churning black ocean. Towering bone spires rose from the depths, and massive shapes moved beneath the surface. The 3rd door hovered in the distance, pulling everything toward it. I turned and saw the diner, floating like an island of decay in an endless void. Luke shook my shoulders. "We cannot stay here. There has to be a way back." A new sound cut through the wind, a slow wet dragging. The creature from the tunnels crawled onto the ledge behind us. Its body was barely human now, a mass of glistening tendrils and eyes that blinked in random places. Its mouth opened wide enough to split its head in half, and the voice came from it directly this time. "Bring him, Nathan. Step through together." Luke shoved me behind him, gripping the broken chair leg like a spear. He faced the abomination with a defiance I could barely comprehend. "Go, Nathan. Find the way out. I will hold it off." I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. "I will not leave you." The wind shifted. The ledge beneath us cracked. Pieces of concrete fell into the black ocean below. The pull of the 3rd door grew stronger. I felt my body leaning toward it against my will. Then I saw it, far across the void, past the twisting spires and the hovering door, was a faint glow. a warm yellow light, like a street lamp on a quiet night. It pulsed softly, calling to me. The first door. I had closed it, but maybe it was not truly gone. The creature lunged. Luke swung the chair leg, hitting it square in the mass of its head. A high-pitched shriek tore through the void. Tendrils whipped out, striking Luke across the chest and throwing him to the ground. I ran to him, grabbed his hand, and pulled with everything I had. "Do you see it, Luke?" The light. He coughed blood and nodded weakly. Then we sprinted across the crumbling ledge, leaping over gaps where the concrete had fallen away. Behind us, the creature howled and began to chase, its tendrils lashing like whips. The pull of the third door grew unbearable. My vision swam. Luke staggered, and I grabbed him, refusing to let go. Ahead, the faint light grew brighter. I could hear a soft hum, like a lullaby my mother used to sing. The ledge ended. A single beam of light stretched out from it, now as a tightrope, connecting us to the glow in the distance. Below, the black ocean writhed with movement. Luke hesitated. "We cannot make it." We have toe stepped onto the beam. It swayed under our weight, though it was only light, not solid. Each step felt like walking through a dream. The creature screamed. Behind us, I dared to look back. It had reached the edge, tendrils flailing, its form unraveling in the wind of the void. Pieces of it broke away, turning into black smoke that drifted toward the third door. Halfway across the beam, I felt it, a hand around my ankle. I almost fell. Luke grabbed me and yanked me upright. We ran faster, the beam flickering under our feet. The light ahead engulfed us. Warmth spread through my chest. I felt the pull of the third door break. I fell onto solid ground. My hands hit wet pavement. I was back in the alley. The city was whole again. Streetlights hummed. A distant siren wailed. Luke lay beside me, coughing, his shirt soaked with blood, but alive. The alley was empty. No creature, no black residue, no voice in my head. We staggered to the street. Cars passed by, normal and unaware. People walked. Under the glow of the city, their faces calm and unknowing. Luke leaned against a wall. Trembling. Did that really happen? I stared at the night sky. The stars were still there. The air was cool. I do not know, but deep inside, I could still feel it. A faint hum. A distant whisper. The third door was still open.